Hey everybody, this is Karina with Phonics in Motion. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to focus on teaching you the daily routine for phonemic awareness using the kinesthetic motions for the phonemes, the KMPs, along with poetry and song. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the training, and then I'm so grateful to have my colleague Becky here with me today, who's going to demonstrate the routine and talk about some specific examples of what I will share with you now. So this is an explicit, multisensory, daily 5 to 10 minute routine where the core pillar of early literacy that we're developing is phonemic and phonological awareness. Particularly, we are working on identifying the sounds and isolating them by using the kinesthetic motions for the phoneme along with poetry in a daily routine. And we're really checking for learners' accurate tension as they perform the motions. We want to be kid watchers. We want to watch them performing the motions to make sure that the KMP that they're performing matches the correct articulation of the sound. The motions deliver the learner a ton of information about how to actually produce each sound, and it creates a neurological link in the brain between the sound and the motion. They're very powerful, and we want to make sure that they're performing them correctly. A huge part of accomplishing that is making sure that you can perform them correctly. So refer to the KMP video library just to brush up on the motions that you plan to use each week. Start each day with a monthly poem. We do this all month long. It's usually just a minute, sometimes less, and it's a great way to start the day. In the beginning of the month, you're starting simply by using only the focus sounds that are in the scope and sequence. And as the month progresses, you have the opportunity to review all of the sounds that you've covered in the past and also to expose many of the KMPs that are coming up in future months. By doing this, it enables you to meet the needs of all of your students in a group setting right where they are. So you are reviewing sounds that have already been covered, offering your strugglers repeat exposures, but also enriching your advanced learners who might be ready for a sound that isn't in the scope and sequence for many months to come. So we are constantly spiraling, offering exposures and reviews of sounds throughout the monthly poem all month long. Next, we chant the weekly poem, and it's the exact same thing. On Monday, we're focusing on the focus sounds, and later in the week, we're reviewing and exposing many KMPs. Here's the text of the poem that Becky's going to focus on, Two Little Apples. In the beginning of the week, we recommend not showing the text of the poem and truly inviting our little ones to become investigators of sound. Really listen and perform the motions. Invite them to see if they can get them with you. First demonstrate for them, use the motions, sing it, show them, then ask them to join you. Start simply and add more sounds in over time. When Becky talks about developing concepts of print, etc., of course, at that point in the routine, you would have the text up and you'd be talking through all of the additional teaching opportunities that she will share with you. Here's a quick snapshot of a scope and sequence for this poem. I believe this is from the first grade scope and sequence. Each scope and sequence for each grade is of course different, so make sure to open your literacy routines. But here you see we are focusing on the ah sound in the beginning of the week, but by the end of the week we point out that you can review all of these previously covered sounds in this poem to support strugglers and just offer those repeat exposures to the entire class. But you can also use this poem to expose more complex sounds that are coming up in future months and enrich your advanced learners. When Becky talks to you about all of the wonderful ways that you can use this poem to develop all of the pillars of early literacy, here are just a few examples. Feel free to press the pause button now if you'd like to really look through this. I will save this for her as she models, but I want to point out that each routine in Phonics in Motion has a core pillar of early literacy that it focuses on. For example, the KMP routine is our core phonemic awareness scope and sequence where we are really focusing on that skill, and the scope and sequence is designed entirely with that skill in mind. However, everything is very intentionally overlapping for connected teaching that truly delivers on the science of reading. And so we invite you to think about all of the ways that you can use this routine to make those connections. It is a very powerful opportunity for teaching every day in just 5 to 10 minutes. You can teach phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, and connect the dots for your learners in this very quick routine. PIM language, phonics in motion, is all about engaging little ones. We really harness that kid energy and we take advantage of their eagerness to get moving, and we invite them in to take ownership of their learning. So we ask them questions. For example, what do you hear? Show me. Our favorite question in phonics in motion is, what do you hear? And then we follow it with the command, show me, with the KMP, of course. We explain to them that they are detectives and investigators of language. So I'm going to perform a lot of KMPs. See if you can get them too. Can you hear them? Show me the motion. We really engage with them in this way. If you make an error, I'd like to invite you to make that a teachable moment and just play with them. They will love catching you in your mistakes, of course, as you probably already know. But play with them. Does that sound right? Does that look right? No. What should it really be? Lastly, perform the KMP and demonstrate the motion, and then ask them to link text to the sound. So what letter or letters make that sound? Show me in the poem. So in the first bullet point here, we're saying, what do you hear? Show me with the motion. And then in the last bullet point, we're performing the motion and saying what letters from the code in the text, show me, make that sound. Before we continue, and I pass this along to Becky, I want to just demonstrate to you the power of connected teaching. Most programs offer fantastic instruction in the particular skill that they develop. For example, some programs focus solely on developing phonemic and phonological awareness in maybe a 10-minute daily drill. However, they do not connect authentically to the other pillars of early literacy. And we know that in order to support little ones and really deliver our instruction in the way that the brain learns to read, we need to make those connections for them. The KMPs do just that. The KMPs are emotion that you can bring with you into any other program or any other component of phonics in motion, far beyond the daily poetry routine. So we are constantly asking, what do you hear? Show me. We use the motion in the handwriting routine with the reading and writing monster, where we develop letter ID, directionality, speech to print matching, and proper letter formation and stroking. Of course, it's used in modeled written language on the language calendar, and where we focus on phonics and phonics in motion, all of the spellings for the vowel sounds, the diphthongs, and the R-controlled vowels are organized by window, and the window is the sound. What do you hear? So the name of each window is the motion, and that is the way in to teaching the spelling. First, what do you hear? So the motions really are the link and provide teaching opportunities and connections, literal connections, between phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, handwriting, and more. They weave the rope of early literacy together for you without much thought. Everything in phonics in motion starts with demonstration. So we are huge fans of the gradual release of responsibility. It is explicit, it's multisensory. We start by demonstrating, we show them, we explain, we demonstrate, we think aloud, we talk aloud about what we're doing. And then we invite learners to join us, and then we move toward independent practice. When you're ready for independent practice, there are downloadables and materials available for you to print out and support learners as they solidify and practice the skills that you will have already modeled with this daily modeled explicit routine. This is critical because Phonics in Motion is all about removing the burden of learning from students, removing the stress, making it fun, honoring the child, and demonstrating for them, and then inviting them to join us while we use our bodies and teach and practice language in a connected manner. And in order to do that, we have to show and demonstrate the expectation, show them the right way to do it, and then practice together. So this is what you'll follow in all 4 routines. Now I'm going to pass it over to Becky, my fabulous colleague, who's going to demonstrate the daily poetry routine. Take it away, Becky.
Okay, boys and girls, the first time we read the poem, Two Little Apples, I want you to listen for the S sound. 2 little apples hanging on a tree. 2 little apples smiling at me. I shook that tree as hard as I could. Down came the apples. Good. Okay, boys and girls, the next time we read the poem, I want you to listen for another sound. I want you to listen for the ah sound as well. 2 little apples hanging on a tree. 2 little apples smiling at me. I shook that tree as hard as I could. Down came the apples. Good. All right, boys and girls, I am going to throw in a lot of sounds this time, and I want you to listen and see if you can hear all the sounds that I hear. 2 little apples hanging on a tree. 2 little apples smiling at me. I shook that tree as hard as I could. Down came the apples. Good. Now that we've shown and done the poem, focusing on the sounds, I would say to the children, boys and girls, we heard the sound S. Show me S. And then I would direct their attention to the poem where the word smiling is, and then we would make that connection to the sound S, and what would you expect to see at the beginning of that word, and I would circle the S. And then I would go back to another sound that I focused on, like say the word apples. Show me, what do you hear at the beginning of the word apples? Show me ah. And I would go back to words like apples and at and as, and we would go back in the poem and say, what would you expect to see at the beginning of those words? And then make that connection from the ah to the letter A and circle the letter A's. And throughout the week, you would do the same thing. What did you hear? Show me, and then locate that sound to the text in the poem and circle those focus sounds and the letters that represent them.
Becky, how do you develop concepts about print? And everything that you've shared with us so far has primarily been focused on the phonemic awareness component of this routine. And since this routine is done daily, it provides an opportunity to develop so many of the pillars of early literacy: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. How are some of the ways that you might develop concepts about print or talk about vocabulary or fluency? Can you demonstrate connecting the other pillars with the routine?
Absolutely. So this poem, in addition to talking about things like going from left to right, and that return sweep in the poetry, this poem lends itself to really talking about things like commas. So after you're doing the 2 little apples hanging on a tree, there's a comma. So really talking about why that comma is there and how good readers pause when they hear a comma. Of course, you have periods in there as well, and you also have exclamation marks. So you can be fun and playful with the children and show them the difference between saying, good. Did I read that like I was excited? No, let's read it like we're excited, because when readers see an exclamation mark, we're going to read it like we're excited. Good. And you can be playful and really silly with them as you do that. So you definitely can talk about commas, exclamation marks, periods. You can talk about the capital letters that you see at the beginning of the lines and why that is. So that's some of the CAP skills that you could do. You also could talk about vocabulary words. So one vocabulary word that I suggest to take out from this poem would be something like using the word shook. So you could tell the boys and girls, what did we do? So shook is a form of shake, and we shook what? We shook the tree. Show me what it would look like if you shook a tree. And you would say, boys and girls, if you shook something, it means you moved it back and forth, like really hard with all your muscles. You shook it. So show me what that looks like, and be silly and have them act it out so they can picture what that would really look like. And then that brings more meaning into the poem. Sometimes we take for granted and think that kids know what these words mean. So have an opportunity to explain, pick out a word a day, explain what it means, and have them act it out. And then you also can use comprehension skills with them. Poetry is a great way to talk about the main idea. When kids get older, in the older grades, we just assume they know what main idea is. But if you're talking about your weekly and your monthly poem, and the kids really understand that, it's a great way to just bring in, what is the main idea about this poem? So you can say to the kids, after you've read it a couple times, boys and girls, what is this poem all about? This poem is all about the two little apples that are hanging on the tree. And you can start with that, and then you blend in that vocabulary words. The main idea of this poem is. Then throughout the week, you can also add in details. So then you can have kids talk about the details in the poem and what happened to the two little apples in the poem. Another thing you can do with this poem is substitutions, phonemic substitutions, which are super fun. And as the kids get to do them, they love to like come up with their own ideas. So something you could do just for fun is every time you hear the ah sound in this poem, you could tell the boys and girls you're going to substitute a different sound. So instead of saying two little apples, you could say apples, and you could substitute it with long A, for example. And that would sound like two little apples hanging on a tree. Two little apples smiling ate me. It's fun, it's playful, and that is how kids get to learn all those phonetic things about how to manipulate sounds in a fun way. And then you could also focus on your poetry with sight words. So good examples of sight words in this poem would be like the and that. And so if you're working on sight words, which again, because we're not doing this in isolation, you could also be working on this in your language calendar. So you would draw attention to the word the and that in some way, whether you're boxing it or highlighting it in your poem, because kids just know that these are words that we just have to be able to look at and know what those words are.
Thank you so much. So in the beginning of Becky's demonstrated routine, she focused on one sound, and then toward the end of the week, she layered in a ton of sounds, which is a great example of repeat exposures. Many of those sounds will have already been developed in previous weeks and even previous grades. So repeat exposures appear very frequently in this routine for strugglers. And then we can also enrich our advanced learners by layering in sounds that we haven't yet focused on. In that way, you can reach a variety of skill levels in a group setting by supporting strugglers and enriching advanced learners at the same time in the classroom. And then for phonics, we can naturally and authentically make a link to the vowel house by asking students, what window in the vowel house does that word belong in? And so for apples, we might go and have a student show us the short A or the A window. Becky mentioned phonemic substitution and saying apples instead of apples. And so you might want to compare those two windows, the long A window and the short A window would be a great opportunity. But this 5 to 10 minute daily poetry routine with the KMPs can be switched up and kept super fresh all week long. It lends itself to so many teaching opportunities and truly makes connections between all of the pillars of early literacy.